You may have already noticed this happening with your twins. One of your twins comes home from soccer practice and announces, I'm not as fast as Emma. Or maybe during dinner, one twin says, everybody likes Tyler better than me. So welcome to the comparison. The twins are going to compare themselves to each other. And it's completely normal, but it can be tough to watch and a bit of a parenting challenge. So today we're going to talk about how to handle the twins when they start comparing themselves to each other.
Welcome to the Dad's Guide to Twins podcast, the podcast that'll help you survive and thrive as a father of twins. Now, here's your host, the author of the book, The Dad's Guide to Twins, Joe Rawlinson.
Hey everybody, this is Joe Rawlinson. Thank you for joining me today on the podcast. As always, I'm glad that you're with me. You can find me online at dadsguidetotwins.com, where you'll find tons of articles and resources to help you along your twin parenting journey. If you want to help support the show and support Dad's Guide to Twins, head on over to twin-t-shirt-company.com. That's my merch store where you can find tons of uniquely designed t-shirts for twin dads, twin moms, and twin families. Once again, that's twin-t-shirt-company.com. So around ages 4 to 7, kids develop some social comparison skills. They're trying to figure out how they stack up against other kids, which is totally normal, totally expected part of growing up. But for twins, this process is kind of accelerated. So my girls have always had a built-in companion and therefore a built-in comparison point who's exactly the same age, in the same house, often in the same classroom, and looks just like them. So when other kids compare themselves to random classmates, twins are comparing themselves to the person they have spent their entire life with. This comparison really kicks into high gear during elementary school. One twin gets picked first for kickball while the other waits. One twin breezes through an assignment or homework while the other one struggles. This is when peer relationships and visible abilities like athletic or academic become really important to the kids. And for twins, everything gets magnified because they can immediately compare themselves to each other. Here's what we noticed with my girls and with other twin families. When comparison becomes constant, twins often fall into complementary roles. So you may get the athletic one or the artistic one, for example, or the outgoing twin and the shy twin. You know, some specialization is fine. Actually, it's pretty normal. But it becomes a problem when a child feels stuck in that role and believes they cannot succeed in areas where their twin shines. Kids who constantly compare themselves to their sibling, struggle with their self-esteem and their own self-worth. So this particularly is seen when they see their shortcomings compared to their sibling or their twin. This may kind of push them to avoid new activities out of fear that they won't measure up, or they become overly competitive in ways that damage their relationship with their twin. You're going to have to stop the comparison language coming from you. This may seem obvious, but you're probably doing it more than you realize. Instead of saying something like, your sister is so good at sharing, why can't you be more like her? Try, I need you to take turns with the Legos. So you're being direct, specific, but you're avoiding the comparison between the children. Pay attention to how you describe your twins to other people while they're listening. I caught myself talking about our girls once at a family gathering, and I mentioned that one of my girls was a social butterfly. So guess what that implicitly said about her sister? Her sister was not a social butterfly. So remember that your kids are always listening. So be careful with the words that you use. So focus on describing behaviors, not comparisons. When you're praising one child, praise their behavior. You don't necessarily have to put down or compare against the other. And avoid saying things like more like or better than. Stop yourself before that comes out of your mouth. Try to rephrase it to focus on the one individual. And notice the labels that you've assigned and actively use different descriptions for each child. Because each twin needs time to be seen as a whole person, not just half of a pair. And regular one-on-one time with each parent is non-negotiable. So even 20 minutes of focused attention helps. For example, I'd love to take one of my girls out to lunch with me, and the next week I would take the other daughter out for lunch. So those individual conversations are where I really got to know each of my girls as herself and start to build that relationship with each of them. Consider separate activities based on individual interests. For example, one twin may want to do gymnastics and the other one may want to do soccer. You'll see that each twin gets to develop skills and friendships independently when they're in different activities. Of course, I understand this brings a little more complex logistics. Welcome to twin parenting. You may be going one direction with one twin and your partner may be going the other direction with the other. Now, your twins don't have to do everything separately, but, at least one different activity gives them some space to breathe. And as we talked about before on the podcast, help form relationships with friendships that are just theirs, just that one twin and his or her friends. Now, be careful because kids can smell fake praise from a mile away. So don't manufacture equivalent compliments like, "You're both winners in my book." They know that's nonsense. Instead, notice genuine individual qualities. For example, one of your twins may be incredibly persistent when learning something new, or she'll practice the same piano song 20 times until she nails it. Her sister may demonstrate creative problem solving. So she'll find 3 different ways to build the same set or solve a puzzle. Point out character strengths like kindness, humor, curiosity, and courage. These aren't directly comparable. You can't measure who's more kind or, the way you can measure how fast somebody runs. So when you shift from comparing achievements to noticing their individual characters, some of that competitive tension between your twins will start to decrease. The goal for your twins isn't for one of them to be better than the other. The goal is to improve each individual's skills over time. So instead of always making things a competition, you can, instead of saying, who can do more push-ups, you say, can you do more push-ups than you did last week? Or what's something you learned this year that was hard last year? Or how is your reading compared to how it was at the beginning of the school year? This shows you that you can shift the focus from external comparison to internal progress. The growth mindset approach leads to better long-term outcomes than when you're just constantly being competitive in comparisons. And one of my girls was getting frustrated that her sister could swim faster than her. So we started tracking her own swim times and then celebrated when she could beat her previous record. Her twin's times became irrelevant. She was competing against herself. When one twin says, "It's not fair that he's better at baseball," and other such comments of, "It's not fair," you want to validate the feeling that your child is having while also reframing the situation. For example, I hear that it's frustrating when something feels hard to you. Everyone has different things that come easily and things that they have to work at. What's something you're proud of learning to do? This acknowledges their emotion without reinforcing the comparison trap. You're teaching them that different doesn't mean better or worse, it just means different. Family members, coaches, friends, they will all compare your twins to each other, sometimes with good intentions, sometimes thoughtlessly. When you hear it, gently redirect or talk to these other adults about it. For example, they're each working on different skills right now, or we try not to compare them since they're individuals with their different strengths. You may have to direct conversations with your own parents, the grandparents or family members about this. So your advocacy for your own twins, your own family, teaches your kids that they don't need to accept others' comparisons either. Some rivalry is normal, always between children and between siblings and twins especially. But watch out for some red flags. So, for example, if one child is consistently holding back to avoid outshining their twin, or an intense distress when one twin succeeds at something, or if there's persistent negative self-talk related to comparisons, for example, "I'm the dumb one," or "I'll never be as good as her," one twin becoming overly focused on beating the other rather than personal enjoyment, or if there's physical aggression that seems tied to competitive feelings. If you're seeing these patterns, consider consulting a child psychologist who understands twin dynamics. This isn't a failure on your part. It's getting help early before patterns become entrenched with your twins. So what do you do when one twin does legitimately have different abilities? This gets complex because of developmental delays or challenges early in their lives. Twins can develop at different rates, and that may lead to developmental delays, learning differences, physical disabilities. Typically, the developing twin may feel guilty about their advantages or face pressure to accomplish things more easily, while the twin with challenges may struggle to try to keep up or with self-esteem as differences become more pronounced. So honesty needs to be calibrated to the developmental level of your child. So explain differences in age-appropriate terms. Emphasize that everyone needs different kinds of support. Ensure both children receive attention for their individual progress and efforts. And, make them, through your actions and through your words, show them, that you love them equally, even though they are different. I've talked to dads on the podcast before, where one twin is kind of excelling, the other has some challenges. And so if this is your situation, you don't have to do this alone. A lot of twin parents have found connections with other families in similar situations through either their local Parents of Twins club or through a particular disability support group. So, reach out to those locally or online to try to figure out how you can better support your children through these challenges. The twin bond can be one of the most significant relationships in your twin's life. So your goal isn't to eliminate all the comparison or competition. That's not really possible to totally do that, but you want to help your children develop a relationship where they can be genuinely happy for each other's successes while pursuing their own paths. Encourage collaboration alongside healthy competition. My girls work together on projects. They help each other with challenges. They have shared interests. This builds mutual support that can coexist with individual achievements. Model celebrating other successes in your own life. When I am genuinely happy about my friend's promotion or marathon finish, my kids can see someone else's win doesn't diminish my own worth, and they can start to replicate that in their own lives. The comparison phase hit hardest for us between ages 5 and 7. It's gotten better as the girls have developed stronger individual identities. They still compare themselves. They're human, just like all of us, but it's not as challenging because they've had years to practice now, working on their individual strengths, comparing themselves to where they were before, not necessarily to their sibling. So the foundation you build now by treating your twins as individuals, celebrating those unique strengths, and minimizing comparison will serve them well their entire lives. Here's my rule of thumb. See each child fully, love each child completely, and trust that they have their own path to follow. Your twins will spend their entire lives navigating their unique relationship. Your job is to give each child the tools to value themselves independently while appreciating the special bond that they share. When in doubt, focus on personal growth over competition, create opportunities for individual experiences, and watch your language for subtle comparisons you may not realize that you're making. What comparison challenges have you faced with your twins? I would love to hear about them. You can drop me an email, joe@dadsguidetotwins.com, or reach out to me on Instagram @twindadjoe is my handle there. I would love to hear how things are going for you and your twins and how you've overcome these comparison challenges. Again, today's show is brought to you by twintshirtcompany.com, where you'll find dozens of t-shirts designed specifically for twin dads, for twin families. These are fun shirts that'll make you laugh, make you smile, and will be fun to wear out in public when you're with your family. Head on over to twintshirtcompany.com. Once again, thanks so much for listening, and I'll see you next time.